Hello friends, I am coming to you from in front of my Christmas tree because I decorated it yesterday and I really like it. So the more that I get to look at it, the better, and that means you get to look at it today too. But anyway, today we're gonna go through some of my top tips and tricks that I picked up from really heavily using Notion over the past year. I think I've learned a lot of good things and I wanna share them. So to get started, I will go ahead and start recording my screen. I have just made this page that we're gonna use for demoing a bunch of different things so I can show you examples of everything I'm talking about. And then I'm also gonna show you for most of these things, different ways that I use them in practice. So the first thing is just a couple general page settings. It took me way too long to find these and it's not like anything groundbreaking, but it is just one of those things that like makes it look a little bit nicer depending on what you're doing with the page. So the first thing is that most of my pages I set to be full width. By default, this is how your Notion page looks, where everything's kind of in the central column, and then everything has a little bit bigger text. And I generally like full width and small text for a lot of the ways that I use Notion. Of course, I play around with it depending on the type of page, but just to show you what that looks like, you get to it in the top right corner with the little 3-dot menu. You click on that, and then there are toggles for small width or small text and full width. So I like playing around with those just to get a feel for how you want to lay out the page, especially if you're going to do multiple columns for things. Full width is probably a little bit better for you. And then small text, I just think it's easier to read. I'm the kind of person who likes to see as much on the screen at one time as possible, so I almost always have small text turned on. And for the purpose of this video, I'm going to turn both of those things off just because we are going down the notes here. The next thing is toggles. So I use toggles a lot. And another thing that I picked up is just little formatting shortcuts. So let's see, I pretty much always do a backslash to get to the commands, and then I'll just type in toggle and pull up a toggle list. I use these for all kinds of things. I use this for grocery lists, I use this for shopping lists, pretty much anything that has information that I don't need to see all the time, I put in a toggle. I've also started doing little toggles for each of the days in my daily planner, now that I do all of my daily planning in Notion, and it just helps me like open things up when I want to see everything for the whole week, but then also not feel super overwhelmed every day coming and looking at a big page of to-dos that are unchecked. So I like toggles a lot. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was the formatting shortcuts. So just like I pulled up the toggles with a little backslash, you can also do some different numbers. Like I use the size 3 heading a lot, so I just type in 3 and that's the first option. But recently I've gotten really into using the numbers for columns as well. So whenever you type in a number 1, 2, or 3, it'll pull up that heading by default. But if you go down twice, you can add in 3 columns, which I think is really cool. So I'll just do test, 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 and you'll see that under my toggle, it put those 3 columns in. So the more I've started using toggles and different things, I've noticed that it's not always easy to add in new columns in all of these areas. So that's a little quick way to add in your columns, and then you can just move them around as usual. Next up, we have buttons, and I use buttons for a few different reasons. Pretty much anytime you do something that's a repeated action, having a button is really nice, and I've really started using buttons a lot in the last probably like 8 months. One thing that I use a button for is making a new page section, and we'll create a new button together just by doing the slash and typing in button, and I'm just gonna title this one page section. You can also give buttons a little icon or a little emoji, which is nice. So I'm just gonna do this little snowflake since it's all wintry. But then you can go down and it'll say when button is clicked, some new action happens. So if I wanted to add a new page section, I would click insert blocks, and then I can just type in whatever I want in here. If this is related to my planner and I want it to populate new week, that's usually how I populate my new weeks. I have a button for it. I might add in, I don't know, 2 columns, and I'll put Monday. So obviously that's a really simplified version of what I have in my weekly planner, but if I just click it, new page section, it populates all of that stuff. This works really well. I've noticed for anything that I have recurring, so since I use this for my planner, if I have like a workout class I go to every week, if I have certain days that I work in the office versus working from home, populating those into my planner already and then just being able to click a button and make any edits if there's a random change that week is really nice. And again, this is an area where I leverage toggles too, so you can have like all of these as toggles. Little tip, this one I've known for quite a while, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but if you just highlight a bunch of things and then you click turn into, you can turn them into a to-do list, you can make them a bulleted list, but you can also make them toggles. So if I wanted to make all of my days toggles at once, that's probably how I'd do it. And then in here, I can come in here and put like a little to-do. The little shortcut for that is just to use the bracket keys and a space, and then it makes a to-do. And maybe I have a workout class, I don't know. But this is just another way to make it really easy to fill these things in. Another thing that I use buttons for is a new page in a database. So I'm not going to build one of those out with you, but I am going to show you some different ways that I use them. And this mostly comes into play for me in my finance hub. So I've started tracking all of my expenses and doing budgeting and that kind of thing in Notion this year. And the buttons help so much. So let me pull up that page and we will take a look. Alrighty, so on my finance hub, I have quite a few buttons on the left-hand side of the screen. So the first one that I'm going to take a look at are these actions here. And these are all repeated actions that I do in this template, and they all add a new page to one of my databases. So pretty much all of these are just adding pages to my transactions database. And they're things that are a little bit tedious to set up. So I have a lot of pre-populated fields and it just makes it easier. So for example, Capital One. I have a Capital One credit card, and if I'm making a payment on it, I would just click on this Capital One button, and then it will pre-populate the category, which is always not applicable. I don't have a budget category for paying my credit card. And then it populates my from account, so my account that's paying off my credit card. And then all I have to do is enter an amount. It pre-fills in the date for me. The date that I click the button is the date that it selects. And then to account is going to be that Capital One credit card account. This is really nice because, again, all I have to do is enter in the amount. I have a lot of little customized buttons for finance stuff because some of these fields are really tedious to fill out every time, especially if it's the same information. And I am here for efficiency. So when I started building this template out, I started thinking about every repeated action that I would be doing on a more than once a month basis or at least a monthly basis, and just making buttons for it to make it easier for myself. So now if I'm paying off a credit card, I don't have to come in here and pick which one it is. I have a separate button for each account, and it just fills everything in, and I'm not missing anything. Since all of this finance stuff is all really running on a lot of formulas and things, if I miss one field, it can throw off a formula somewhere. So I've tried to pre-populate as many fields as I can so that I'm not messing something up when it comes to the data that I'm trying to see here. Another button that I have, which has a lot going on in it, is Payday. So if I click on Payday, it actually pulls up this missing info page. And there's some different sections we're going to talk about in more detail in a different part of the tips. But essentially all I have to do from here is just plug in which month I'm getting paid in, and then all of my other like default payday things, since I'm salaried, I always get paid the same amount. I always send the same amount to different accounts on payday. And this sends all the money to all the places it needs to go, and I just have to fill in the month. So I really like having that button because I don't have to remember to make 5 different page entries or however many this is. It's a lot of different pages that I have to enter to, again, make all my calculations work out properly. We're gonna take a look at how the payday button is built out in just a minute, but I want to touch on a few other things first. Back here, the last button I wanna talk about is going to a page. So one of the button actions you can set is to open a page, a form, a URL, and I use this mostly for opening pages. You could just use it as a hyperlink to some other website if you wanted to add a quick link for yourself or something like that. But a lot of times I will use this as a home button. So in the case of my finance hub, I have a home button on every page so I can always get back to my main page. Here I could do a link to my planner, and I could just call this button planner. And you can choose if you want it to open as a center peek or a side peek or a full page. And most of the time I open things as a full page, but if, let's say, I just wanted to be able to quickly glance at my planner from this page and then go back to it, I would just leave it as center peek. So I'll hit done. Then if I click on planner, it pulls up my planner in this little center peek. So I super duper love the buttons. You're gonna see exactly how useful the payday one is in just a minute, but I wanna go over some of the database view stuff first. So the first thing is just some options that you have that it took me a while to figure out exactly how they worked. And the first one is the table view. This is like the default database view. And if you're wondering how I made this, maybe you're a really heavy template user, but you don't build a lot of these things yourself, I'll again just do the backslash and then database. And this one I just did as inline. You can also do full page and then pull views in, but we'll just do inline for now. And from here, I could just give this a name. So let me just call this video practice. And I can just put in whatever I want for my names here. And I don't know, let me just make some tags. Now that we have that set up, I'm just gonna go ahead and hide the database title. I pretty much always do that. I think it just makes everything look a little bit cleaner. And then from here, I'm going to click on the little 3 dots next to the new button. And from here, I'm going to go to layout. And this is where you can also change the layout if you want to flip between them and decide which one works best for you. But some of the things I've realized that I really like with the table layout is hiding the vertical lines. I think it makes things look cleaner. Sometimes I leave them because it's more practical to have them there, but play around with it and maybe it'll look less busy to you one way or the other. So I tend to leave out the vertical lines. And then another thing that I like to change depending on what the database is used for and what's in the pages is changing this open pages in. Sometimes I'll change it to a center peak or full page, just depending on how much information is on the pages. So that is something that I overlook like almost every time I set up a database, but it helps so much with the functionality. Like this side peek option, if I hit open, it opens off to the side. But sometimes I want it to just open the full page and not show this page anymore. Or sometimes I want it to open in the center. So it just depends. And when it opens in the full page, a lot of times that's when I'll put a home button nested into that page. So let's say that this planner was like my home button. Maybe I would copy this and like paste it in here. So that's one option. Another option and a view that I didn't use very much until the last month or so is the list view. I always just felt like, what's the point of this? It just seems like a more spread out table view, but I've realized there are some really nice features here. So again, I'm gonna go to the layout and hide my database title. And here we have the option, I think we have the option in the table as well in all the views to show or hide the page icon. Sometimes I'll hide it if I think it just looks a little busy. And then the thing that I really liked here was properties and realizing you can actually put the tags or whatever else you have before the page name. I think this looks really clean and nice sometimes. Just having it show up before that, and it also like keeps everything on the left side of the screen. I don't know. These are just things that I've been playing around with and I kind of like different views for different reasons, but I'll show you a couple examples at the end of how this looks in a more populated database. And then there's the gallery view, which is kind of like my go-to thing that I really like looking at for most practical purposes. And here I am going to add another category actually. And this time I'm gonna add a formula. And I'm not gonna get too into the formulas, but one trick that I've learned is, let's say for our gallery view, let me do some cleanup here. Go to layout, and I'm gonna make this a small card just for myself. And card preview, I'm gonna change from page content to none, actually. I'm gonna hide my page icon. Anyway, I'm gonna go to properties and I'm gonna show our tag. And I'm also just gonna go ahead and show our formula while I'm at it. Anyway, let's say this little tag, I want it to have some sort of heading just to give me more context to what the tag is for. If you mouse over it, you can see it says tags, but sometimes just depending on what you're looking at, especially if you're looking at formulas with numbers and things, it's nice to have a header so you know what number you're actually looking at. And I have really been enjoying using a formula for that header. And the cool thing about this is if you go to formula and edit property, you can add in any text as a formula. So let's say I wanted header. And if you put it in quotes, it knows that it's just text. If I wanted this to be my formula, and maybe I want to do like a little colon here, then when I go to my gallery view, it shows up as a header. And I really like that. It shows up as that header word and it stays the same across all the pages. So if you make an adjustment to it, you don't have to copy and paste it into every other page. It just does that automatically. So let's say, let me just call this tags. And I'll show you one little formatting thing. So one of the formulas that you can use, let's say I wanted this to be bolded so it stands out a little bit more. I don't want to make this a different color, but you can also use this to change the colors of things. I'm going to type in style and put a parentheses, and then I have my thing, my little word in quotes that I want to stylize, and I'm going to put a comma, and then I'm going to put the letter B in quotes. That will bold it, and I can also put the letter U in quotes. That will underline it. And I think if you do I in quotes, it will italicize it. And then I could put like whatever color I wanted. Let's say I want it to be blue, put that in quotes, and then close my parentheses. And it's gonna do all those things that I told it to do. I'm gonna get rid of the blue for now and hit save. And then when I go back to my gallery view, it shows up bolded and underlined. I think this just adds a little bit to the gallery view, especially depending on like what kind of information you want to show, and it just makes it easier to read, easier to remember what the different numbers or whatever you're looking at are, and it's not overly complicated. Anytime you make a new page, it'll always have that header built in. Like I said, you don't have to remember to copy and paste it. If you change it somewhere, it changes everywhere, and I've really been trying to pick up like those kinds of things with Notion. How can I set it up so that if I change one thing, it goes everywhere it needs to? And speaking of changing something somewhere and having it update everywhere, the next thing I want to talk about is synced blocks. And this is one of my newer favorite things. I think I figured this out about like 6 months ago. And this is really cool because anytime you have something in Notion that you want on a different page, let's say I have like a grocery list that I add to when I'm in some database that has a bunch of recipes, and I like pull up the recipe and then I type out my grocery list on the side, but I also want my grocery list in my planner so I can like check it throughout the week and see what I need to get before I go to the store. That is a really good use case for a synced block. So I can just have one grocery list and copy and paste it to other areas, and if I make an edit somewhere, it will update elsewhere. So like if I check off that I got an item, it will show up checked off any other place I have that block listed, which is really cool. Another thing that I use synced blocks for is navigation menus, and you kind of saw this in my Finance Hub, but on pretty much every page I have a navigation menu that has a return home button, it has other pages in it, and I made this a synced block so that I could copy and paste it onto every page in my Finance Hub and use it as kind of like a navigation bar on a website. Like usually there'll be some sort of menu where you can click around all the pages. You can do that in Notion too. You can make your own little like personal website. That's why I think Notion's so cool. You can really customize it so much. This is a feature I didn't know about until pretty recently. I've really enjoyed that for the Finance Hub. I use it again in my planner. And let's take a look at this in my Finance Hub. You actually saw it a little bit when I was hovering over my navigation here with the home button. And then my actions are actually also a synced block. So you can tell if something's a synced block because when you mouse over it, it has this red outline around it, and you can make something a synced block. Like my links over here are not a synced block, but if I click on that little 6 dot icon, I can turn this into a synced block. You have to scroll down a little bit, but it's right there. And if I turn this into a synced block, it puts that little red line around it. And then if I copy the link to block, I can Control V and paste it as a synced block. And there it is. And if I change something here, it will update in my Finance Hub. You can use this for pretty much anything. You just don't want to have to copy and paste all the time. This is kind of like that formula for a header, but in your actual Notion page. So this is like an extension of what we just talked about there, where in that formula for the header, if I change the header in the formula, it updates on every page. The synced block will also update whatever is inside of it on every page in Notion beyond just like a formula field in a database. Another way that I use the synced blocks in here, and this is getting a little bit more into my payday button example, you can see that I have the navigation synced block on this missing info page so I can return home after I fill out all of my stuff here. I also have the actual missing info section as a synced block because I have some toggles where I have this on different pages and I can toggle down to see if there's any items I need to clean up. Alrighty, and the last thing that we're going to take a look at is less of a Notion feature and more of just a thing that I have found incredibly useful over the last few months, and that is having a mobile dashboard. And this is essentially just a page that has everything I need in Notion on my phone that is in a more mobile friendly format. So a lot of things like my Finance Hub, my daily planner, all of those things are meant to be viewed in multiple columns, and it's kind of hard to look at on my phone. So another reason why I got into this whole synced blocks thing was to take different parts of those pages that I wanted to see on my phone and just put them in a one column view. So I've created a mobile dashboard page for us to play around with. And here I'm gonna add in some synced blocks and just show you the kinds of stuff that I keep on my mobile dashboard. And with that, our mobile dashboard looks something like this. I'm also going to include a screen recording of how I add this to my phone home screen. So if you have the Notion app on your phone, you can add a widget and you can add like a favorite page or something to that widget so that every time you click on it, it takes you to your mobile dashboard. And that's how I have my phone set up. I think it works really well. I really like it. And if there were any other pages that I reference frequently, like maybe I want to be able to go to my planner, I might put in a page and link it to a page and then select planner so that right at the top of my dashboard, I can click into my planner from my phone. But it also has all these lists and other things that I might need to reference frequently as well. That's how I like to use it. And for the sake of the mobile dashboard, I like keeping it as kind of the non-full page view, the non-wide width, the like narrow width one, just because I think it more closely mimics the phone screen and it helps me not put too many things and forget that I'm making this for my phone. And I actually don't want it to be multiple columns. I just want it to be one. And I want it to not be too busy. Alrighty, and I want to get into a few more detailed examples with my current finance hub and the buttons in there that I think are really helpful. One of the things I wanted to get into was payday. So first things first, if I go over here and from here, if I hit the drop down next to new, I can see all the templates I've made, and I made a lot of templates. I don't know that I'm gonna make this many templates for my next year's finance hub, but for this one, I made a template for pretty much every recurring expense I have, every like type of page that I wanted. And in those templates, I have different fields pre-populated. And that feeds into my button for payday. So one of the things you can do when you're making a button that adds a new page to a database is you can say that you want the button to be clicked and then you want to add a page to. You select the database. So mine is always transactions for this purpose. So on payday, I want it to add a transaction for all of these things. And I have a template called salary, and I left the amount blank so that whenever I get any kind of like salary change, whether something changes with my benefits and more money is taken out or less money is taken out before taxes, or I get a raise or whatever, I can come in here and update the amount. And then I have different pages for other things. So when I get paid, I automatically put money into a travel bucket, and that auto-populates when I click this payday button. I put money into some other different accounts and I have templated pages for those, so it will add a page to transactions with that template. Let me just show you what this would look like if I wanted to add a page to transactions and just add it as a new page, like totally blank. I could leave my transaction title empty, or I could say paycheck if I were to do this from scratch and I didn't have a template built out. This is what I would do. I would put in amount, and let's say that's 2,000, I don't know. Category, for me, for the way that I do my budget template, I would put in a, pretty much anything that's not like a charge, I put as not applicable, like any of the paycheck stuff just goes as not applicable. And then I would say that it's going to an account, and it's probably going to my checking account, but I'm just gonna select emergency fund. I don't know. I'm just gonna select what I see. And then date. So the date one is really cool because you can set it to be the date triggered. So that means that when you click on the button, it's gonna put in the date that you clicked on the button. And I think that is really nice for all of this finance tracking stuff. Having that feature makes it so much easier because I almost never have to enter a date in here unless I'm like entering stuff days after it's happened, then I'll go in and edit it, but it always auto-populates a date for me, and that helps a lot. And then you can also adjust the order of these. So I'm gonna wanna move this up a little bit because the last thing that will happen, when I click this button, it'll do all of these actions in order, and the last thing it does is open my missing info page, and that's where I enter in the month. So that's what you guys saw when I clicked the button. But I'm gonna go ahead and delete. And I think that is about it for all of my Notion tips and tricks that I've learned. Some of these were super high level and pretty simple, and then others were very in the weeds. So if you have any questions, definitely let me know in the comments. Again, would love to hear if you're using any of these features differently, like If you're using buttons, what do you use your buttons for? If you're using toggles, what are you using them for? I don't know. If you're using any other features to accomplish similar things to what I'm doing, I would love to know that too, because I think there's so many different ways you can do more or less the same thing in Notion, and I'm always trying to learn. So I hope this was helpful, and if there's anything that you want me to do like a more of a deep dive on, let me know. But thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you soon.